Be ready over there. Good afternoon, everybody. Before we really start into the formal part of the meeting, I'm going to ask Cameron to give a safety brief talk. Cameron.
Thank you, Chair. So we're not expecting a fire drill today. So if one does go off, please leave via the nearest exit. That'll be either through those doors over there or out the chamber fire door just there. The fire assembly point is in the car park out the front. And when you're leaving, please do not use the elevator. Thank you.
Thank you. For those of you who are first time here, welcome. And you may wonder what all these people are doing here. The people here, along to the gentleman in the beige jacket, are members, and they will be listening and debating and making the decisions. I'm a councillor as well, as is my deputy vice chair, Councillor Brown. The other people here are officers who are legal, technical people to advise us should we wish. They will not be making any decisions. We normally try and have a comfort break about every 2 hours, depending on how it goes. That may not be necessary this afternoon. I don't know how it will run. The toilets, should you need them, are out through that door there, turn left. After that door there, on your right. So please help yourself if you want. If you have a mobile phone with you, will you please make sure it's turned off? And please, will you have no talking amongst yourselves, because it's very distracting. And thank you very much for that. Now we have apologies and substitutions, item number 1.
Thank you, Chair. We received apologies from Councillor Lavinia Edwards, who was replaced by Councillor Keith Horgan.
And that's it. Okay. I now have item number 2, declarations of interest.
Chair, I declare an interest on item 5, in that I will be, as the ward councillor, making comments on that application. But so I will leave this place and go and sit over there. And then once I've made my comments and answered any questions of members, I will leave the room.
Thank you very much indeed. That's absolutely fine. We now move on to minutes of the meeting on the 7th of August. Is there any reason, members, why I should not sign those minutes as a correct record after the meeting is finished? No? Okay. Well, I'd like to welcome Councillor Sharp to the committee and hope he enjoys his time with us. And I'd also like to say bon voyage and thank you very much to Tony Hilton and Andrew Phillips, who left the East Cambs District Council on, I believe, the 1st of September. They've contributed for some considerable time, and we thank them and wish them luck in their future career. Having said that, we move on to item number 5, and we start off with the officer's presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Can everybody hear me okay? Yep, great. So agenda item number 5 is a part retrospective application for the construction of 5 1.5-storey detached dwellings with detached garages. The above map shows the outline of the application site shown in red. This is in Borough Green. And the above shows an aerial view of the site as indicated by the blue arrow. So the proposal, as I've already mentioned, is for part retrospective consent for 5 detached dwellings, which are 1.5 stories in scale and have detached garages. My officer report sets out in full all matters to be considered, and the purpose of this presentation is to give you a brief overview of the proposals and answer any questions that members may have. The plans displayed above show a site plan with the previously approved scheme overlaid in red. The elevations for plot 1 are shown and a computer generated image of plot 1's external appearance. The above shows the elevational details for plots 2 and 3 with obscure glazing indicated by the windows shown in black and previously approved elevation outlines shown in faded detail. And then we have plots 4 and 5, again, obscure windows indicated, shown in black and previously approved elevation outlines shown in faded detail or red, as I think plot 4 is. There are also some elevations as approved under the previous schemes, which I've included. I won't dwell on these, but if members need to refer back to them, I have them on the slides. So the main considerations of this application are the principle of development, residential amenity, visual amenity and heritage, highways, ecology, flood risk and drainage. So in terms of the principle of development, the original outline application was approved at Planning Committee in August 2019, and the subsequent reserve matters application was approved in September 2020. Works have commenced on the site, and the purpose of the current application is to seek part retrospective permission for an altered scheme. The current proposal does not seek an increase in the quantum of development and broadly follows the previously approved scheme in terms of the layout and access. The applicant seeks to alter the design of dwellings, and there would be a small increase in the scale to accommodate 1.5 story dwellings rather than single story dwellings. So the principle of development has already been established via the commencement of the previous applications. Moving on to residential amenity, we've sought alterations to this scheme to reduce the footprint of some plots, and particular attention has been paid to ensuring overlooking to neighbouring plots is prevented through the introduction of obscured glazing. And that can be secured by way of planning condition. In terms of the general layout, the arrangement remains similar to the previously approved scheme. There is an increase in height of the dwellings of approximately 1 metre, which is 3.2 feet, and the footprints of the dwellings are directly comparable to the previously approved schemes, with no reduction in distance between the proposed dwellings and the nearest neighbouring properties. In some instances, such as plot 1, there is a greater back-to-back distance achieved by the current scheme. The proposed alterations are not considered to create overlooking to neighbouring properties due to the use of obscure glazing in vertical windows which face neighbouring boundaries, and roof lights to non-habitable rooms. The increase in height of the proposed dwellings is not so significant that this would create any significantly harmful impacts on the amenity of neighbouring occupiers in terms of overbearing or overshadowing, and the dwellings remain laid out in such a way that the single story elements would be the closest elements to any neighbouring boundaries. It's considered reasonable that we impose conditions which restrict the extension of dwellings and addition of windows in order for the local planning authority to fully assess any future proposals. The applicant has submitted a construction environmental management plan, which Environmental Health have confirmed is acceptable, and that can be secured by condition. And Environmental Health have also requested a restriction to construction times as well in order to protect amenity. Moving on to visual amenity and heritage, the applicant seeks to use a hem-span biohouse construction, which is comparable to passive house principles. The external elevations will be cladded in dark grey horizontal timber with clay pan tiles and triple glazed aluminium windows. The proposed dwellings, while increased in height by approximately 1 metre or 3.2 feet from the previous scheme, are considered to be a suitable scale for the setting, and the maximum height of any element of the scheme is 6.5 metres or 21.3 feet. The site is bordered by Sheriff's Court and Church Lane, both of which contain 1.5 or 2 story dwellings, and therefore the minor increase in height from the previous scheme is not considered to be visually harmful in the context of surrounding development. Generally, the design of the proposed dwellings is appropriate to a rural setting and creates a high quality scheme in its own right. Soft landscaping planting is proposed to enhance the site, and trees positioned along the site's perimeters to integrate it within the setting and soften views. And planting is integrated between plots too, which has the effect of diffusing the views of built form when within the site. The council's trees officer has been consulted on the proposals. They have raised some concern regarding certain tree species within the scheme, and therefore this is a condition that's recommended in order to secure the final details of soft landscaping and boundary treatments. In terms of highway safety, the access proposed under the current scheme has already been agreed under previous applications. The access arrangement remains unchanged under the current scheme. Local Highways Authority note that the access is as agreed, and note that parking and turning within the site are acceptable, with access joining a private section of road before adjoining the public highway at an existing junction opposite number 1 Sheriff's Court. The current scheme provides parking arrangements in excess of those required under Policy Com 8, with a minimum of 4 external parking spaces being shown for each plot. Moving on to ecology, the applicant has submitted an ecology report alongside the application. The report acknowledges that the site is currently an active construction site. The report identified that further surveys were required to complete an impact assessment for Great Crested Newts, and the applicant has entered into a Great Crested Newt district level licensing scheme, which therefore meets the legislative requirements regarding Great Crested Newts. The proposed scheme was submitted prior to mandatory biodiversity net gain legislation coming into effect. The site was also subject to clearance as part of the commencement of the previous applications. So in order to achieve a net gain in biodiversity, the applicant is securing the purchase of biodiversity credits totaling 2.45 units, which exceeds the 1.94 units required in order to achieve a net gain. And therefore, our ecologist is satisfied that the proposals are acceptable. In terms of flood risk and drainage, the site is in flood zone 1, so the principle of development is considered acceptable in terms of flood risk. The application doesn't trigger any of the requirements for flood risk assessments, and for a scheme of this size, matters such as foul and surface water drainage is a matter that would be finalised and assessed at a building control stage and would not influence a planning decision. So in summary, members are recommended to approve the application subject to the conditions set out in Appendix 1 of my officer report. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Cameron, now you've got 2 letters, one from Mrs. Nicholson and Mr. Simon, to read out if you would.
Thank you, Chair. So the first one is from Mrs. Carla Nicholson, because Pure Eco Homes and Hemspan had planning approved for 5 single-storey bungalows, but always intended to build 1.5-storey £1 million plus houses on this site, so they did. They then applied for retrospective planning permission once development had commenced, thinking that they could ride roughshod over the planning rules and, more importantly, over the local community. This, unfortunately, has been the developer's arrogant attitude from the start. My main objection is regarding the destruction of the natural environment. They have ripped up hedgerows, felled trees, and dug up the land outside of the boundary, destroying all local habitat. Long gone are the foxes, deer, newts, and barn owls that were a daily sight on this land. Calling their homes eco leaves a sour taste for local residents when their motivation is greed and profiteering. The retrospective "we're going to build it anyway" planning application sets an awful precedent for future development in Borough Green. The land to the south of the site is also owned by the developer for 9 further properties to be built. What will happen next? 3-storey townhouses? A block of flats? If they get away with it this time, they will do it again. More greed, more habitat loss, and no care for the impact on the small rural community of Borough Green. The second letter is from Mr. Simon Finch, and it reads, "The land in the new planning area adjacent to 1 Church Lane has been significantly built up to the point where anyone standing on the ground in the new planning area can see straight over our existing 6-foot fence into our garden and conservatory. The land is now 4 foot higher and sloping down to our land, so I'm expecting that during a heavy rain shower, it will now flood the garden. I assume that you will get them to lower the land back to where it was, the same height as our land. The verge along Sheriff Court Road has also been significantly damaged by the site's lorries, which I assume you will make them repair. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We have now Rachel McDonald. If you'd come up and speak, are you? Okay, well, if you'd like to come up, please turn the microphone on. And I understand you've already made arrangements to share the time for objectors, so you've got 3 minutes.
So I live with my family at Hall Lodge Church Lane. The property currently at plot 5 of the development spans the entire back fence of our garden, is now parallel to it. It's approximately 2 metres away from our fence. We provided photographs of our objection to the retrospective application, which demonstrate the proximity of the property. Our garden is wide and shallow, and so the property is very close to ours. Given its position, the increased height of the current house has a significant adverse impact on our property. It overshadows, it is overbearing, and it provides a greater sense of enclosure than the single-storey house for which the permission has been granted. We recognise we don't have a right to review. That's not the focus of our objection. We've read the Planning Committee's recommendations and make the following comments. Throughout the Planning Committee document, references are made to the height increase of circa 1 metre, and there's zero mention of the changed angles of the houses. Even a cursory review of the plans demonstrates it's more likely 1.5 metres and perhaps slightly higher. It's telling that the revised plans don't state what the original height of the building was going to be. Even if it is just 1.5 metres, that's a third again higher than the original granted permission. As mentioned, the new height of the buildings are over 6.5 metres. The average height of a 2-storey house is between 5.5 and 7. These are now clearly and effectively 2-storey houses. It's very concerning that throughout the Planning Committee document, there's not one mention of the fact these houses have been built in breach of planning permission, not one criticism of a developer who obtained planning permission for single-storey properties, entirely ignored that permission, and has instead built 2-storey properties. We are concerned the council has not considered properly the fact they have allowed the developer to breach its permission. There was a reason that single-storey houses were applied for and on appeal subsequently approved. Simply put, planning permission would never have been granted for the current properties as built. If it would have been, then no doubt that application would have been made back in 2018. It wasn't. Other than the fact that the building work has now commenced at the developer's own risk, nothing has changed. So it's not clear why the retrospective planning application would or should be granted now. There's no indication anywhere in the documentation about why now it is considered that these buildings are appropriate. Perhaps most importantly, we've been very surprised by the apparent lack of legal guidance or involvement in this matter. We've been informed that the council did not seek to stop the progression of the development, despite it clearly being conducted in breach of planning permission, because it considered that if the developer suffered losses, it might then claim them from the council. I don't need a wife who's a senior litigation partner to tell me that's simply not correct. The only way there might have been a risk would have been if there was some uncertainty as to whether the developer had permission to complete the build. This is not the case here. Given the apparent lack of legal input, we'd like to understand to what extent the council has consulted lawyers when considering this retrospective application, if at all. The fact that the council was alerted to the issue a year ago and did nothing about it is extremely concerning. We perhaps expect developers to breach the rules, but the council acts as a check and balance to that. To us, it has failed to perform its role adequately and follow the proper process, and it continues to seem reluctant to hold the developer to account.
Mr. McDonald, you have gone over the time.
Can I have 30 more seconds?
Please just wrap up, but if you can do it, get to the end of a paragraph or make.
After we raised our serious concerns about the 2nd-storey window, which would have been directly overlooking our property, the developer removed the window from the plans. However, given that the planning portal has not proved to be a reliable or up-to-date record, we do need it confirmed today that the window does not form part of the current plans, and that planning consent would be required for any such window to be introduced in the future into perpetuity. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Then, has sorry, I beg your pardon, members, have you got any questions for Mr. McDonald? Councillor Trapp, would you come back? I beg your pardon.
Sorry.
Do you know who alerted the council that the building was actually in excess of what it originally was?
I'm going to need some help with that. I believe Mr. Sharp was informed by one of the local residents.
Thank you.
Chair, if you don't mind, we potentially might have to consider data protection in giving out any such information about individuals. And
I was just going to follow up by saying anything enforcement related, it should not be discussed in open, I'm afraid.
Okay, so that's dealt with. Who was questioning? Councillor Wilson.
Could you indicate on the plan that we've got, which is your house?
Yeah, if you would mind going back to the. So plot 5, as you can see, is on the top left. And ours is the property just beyond the tree line immediately north. So you can't quite see our building in that plan. Yeah, so our property is Hall Lodge, which is on the top left of the plan.
Okay, thanks.
Could I just clarify with the speaker on plans which window so that we can address those comments? Yeah.
We now have the applicants, Sarah Jane Stebbing, please. I can say that I'm going to put 30 seconds on your 5 minutes so that it's been fair for both sides. Please turn your microphone on and start when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to the Planning Officer for setting out the scheme so comprehensively. I want to take this opportunity to say how pleased we are to be here today so that we can finally present to you the current proposals and explain the design approach that underpins this scheme. For clarity, I want to say that this planning application was submitted in April 2023, so it's been a long time coming to this point. These proposals are for 5 dwellings and that will meet the highest of environmental standards. This is achieved by the adoption of market-leading high-performance construction methods, sustainable materials and the latest carbon reduction technology to achieve sustainable homes that go beyond zero, set within an enriched, high-quality, biodiverse landscape environment to provide a new development of the highest quality in Borough Green. The dwellings are being constructed using Hemspan's innovative biohouse system. This is a new concept which is only featured in a handful of developments worldwide. The biohouse standard for design incorporates an off-site manufactured panel system, which is used alongside a series of other significant eco measures, including solar shading, breathable construction materials, to take the development beyond net zero. It is a holistic whole house and whole life cycle approach that is pioneering in the housing and construction industry. This is not lip service. It's reflected by the predicted energy performance ratings for each dwelling. These have been submitted as part of the supporting documents with this application. Every dwelling exceeds 100, the top of the current scale, for both energy efficiency and environmental impact. This is possible because the current proposals have been informed on every level with this exceptional benchmark for sustainability in mind. The plot layout and orientation has been set out to optimise natural light whilst avoiding overheating in the summer and ensure that each dwelling benefits from natural ventilation whilst respecting the surrounding neighbouring buildings' privacy and amenity. The site levels have not changed. It is this environmental performance that is the design driver behind the distinctive architectural form and appearance of the development, with its roofscape created by the extended overhang, creating a perimeter canopy around each dwelling. The eaves of the canopy is modestly set at 2.2 metres high, so that's a little over a standard door height. The ridge line of each dwelling is the result of the intersection of the roof planes. And whilst there is a modest increase in height compared to the extant consent, it's less than, it's within a metre, and the drawings reflect that, and within the outline of the chimney stacks from the previous scheme. It continues to be commensurate to the surrounding buildings north of the site and subservient to the two-storey dwellings east of the site on Sheriff's Court. The proposals make use of part of the resulting roof space to provide a limited amount of accommodation. This has been carefully placed to avoid overlooking of the proximate neighbouring properties and is limited to the part of the footprint that faces into the site. These rooms are lit with high-level roof lights with no potential for overlooking and supplemented with fixed windows in the gables ends, obscured where appropriate. The open plan kitchen and living space at the rear of the dwellings, where the relationship with the neighbouring amenity spaces is most proximate, is always single storey. During this application, we have engaged proactively with your planning officers to amend the design proposals to address concerns about any potential impact on neighbouring amenity. Plot 1, which has the most direct relationship with the neighbouring building, has been revised to increase the distance between the building line and the east boundary of Sheriff's Court. It is now further away from the boundary than the previously approved scheme. There are no high-level windows on this gable, and the overall glazing is also no greater than the previously approved scheme. Plot 2 has a high-level window in the gable end of the single-storey living space, and to address the potential for perceived overlooking, it is proposed that this is fixed and obscured. The relationship to the boundary has not changed, and the current proposals have substantially less glazing than the previous scheme, which featured a full glazed gable end. There is a reduction in light pollution, and this mitigates the impact on the neighbouring amenity. On plot 5, I can confirm that the first floor window on the north elevation was omitted. This room, which serves as a home office space, is served by roof lights at high level looking west, with no potential for overlooking. As with plot 2, the high level window in the single storey living space will be fixed and obscured. The roofscape of this development enables the dwellings to harness and harvest energy on the site through integrated solar panels. Each dwelling's array is designed to generate more energy than used over the course of a year, offering a potential of up to 75% reduction in running costs. As a local authority, you have committed to delivering a cleaner, greener East Cambridgeshire and to work on initiatives to fight against climate change emergency, support zero carbon living and restoring wildlife spaces. As a local authority, you in East Cambridgeshire are leading the way on this. The applicant's ambition is to create beautiful, sustainable homes that go beyond zero. The application documents provide the evidence base to demonstrate that these proposals can deliver that and lead the way too. The proposals are on target not only to reach but exceed the Royal Institute of British Architects 2030 targets for domestic housing. This scheme can be an exemplar for new homes and the construction industry, not simply another small-scale infill housing development. And all stakeholders can take credit for it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Probably experienced in establishing boundaries and pushing them. Anyway, thank you for members. Have you any questions? Councillor Ambrose-Smith.
Good afternoon. I'm quite interested in these building methods, but somewhat confused. I note that you mentioned some of the windows are sealed. Is this a system where the whole house is sealed and the air is recycled within the building, or am I off?
No, there is a whole house ventilation system as part of the system. Not all of the windows are sealed. The ones that are fixed are these specific ones which have a concern about the potential impact if they were opening, that you might be able to look through them, or so those ones are fixed, but there are opening windows.
May I have a follow-up? When these houses are marketed, will they be with some form of, I don't say guarantee, but will they be marketed with some sort of certificate that this house building concept, you know, is valid and that it ensures this, that and the other?
So under building regs, there is a assessment of the house and its technical performance, and that's done at 2 stages. So there is a design stage, which we have the energy performance certificates for, which is sort of on paper. And then there is the testing at the end. And I think I'm right in saying that the testing is, you know, everything is showing that we will achieve what we have set out to do on paper. So yes.
Yeah. So people will be able to buy these marketed properties with a degree of certainty.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Trapp.
I'm sorry, I'm intrigued by why, having submitted an application on the 13th of April, you went ahead with building something which was contrary to what the planning application originally was permitted. Why did you not wait for approval before carrying on the business of building?
So when the work commenced on site, it was under the extant consent because there is a lot of groundworks, the road, the access, and to a certain extent, all of the plot layouts are as the extant consent. I think it would be fair to say that we were not the agent in April, and we have come in November last year in order to work with the planning officers to try and resolve and help resolve some of the issues about moving plot 1 and plot 2. So I think, you know, it is, no one expected to be here in September 2024 is the honest answer.
But you hadn't got permission to change the planning.
That is what this application is here for.
Right, but you went ahead with building it.
Yes.
In the expectation that you will get planning permission? No, sorry, but you know, you had, okay.
Councillor Ambrose Smith. Well, I thought I saw your hand first. Yes, of course. Away you go.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify your comments. Can you clarify if the comments raised by the previous speaker have been addressed? Thank you.
I believe they have. The north elevation window that there was a specific concern was removed, and it is not there. I think that the planning officer's suggestion that the permitted development rights are removed would ensure that that couldn't be put in retrospectively. There's no, you know, it would need planning permission, and that would be back to you.
Thank you.
Away you go.
Thank you, Chair. Hi. With the original application that has been approved, was that also based on the hem-span Biohouse construction style?
No, that wasn't.
It wasn't. So that's why that had chimneys in it that have now disappeared, or one of the reasons.
As I understand it, we were not involved. The applicant was not involved in the original scheme. It was done speculatively as a 5-bed small housing development, and then it was sold on.
Fine. So presumably at some stage post the original application being approved, there's been a change of agents, a change of builder, owner of the site, and it's the new people that have come in that are now looking to achieve this retrospective application. Is that correct?
So the original consent was carried out by others. The applicant purchased the site and is seeking to deliver, instead of 5 small, you know, typical small scale housing development houses, a benchmark sustainable
Mm.
development,
No,
so- which we are here to talk about today, and that is the
I
difference.
think you've spoken commendably about the ecological benefits of the construction style. Okay, it's not passive house, but it's perhaps as close as you can get. I'll take your word for that. I'm not questioning that at all. It's just I'm trying to understand, what changed between 5 bungalows being approved to now 5 1.5-story houses being approved, and just to understand the people that's been involved at the time. And are you saying that the only thing that hasn't changed then is the actual person that owns the site that has maintained the same right the way through and is still there now?
Councillor Horgan, we're going off the questioning here because it's what's in front of you, and I think where we're going is not strictly relevant at the moment. Thank you. Councillor Ambrose Smith.
I'm not sure whether this might be viewed as the same question. The previous speaker suggested that there is an adjoining site. Yeah. The previous speaker suggested that there was a patch of land owned by the same development company adjacent, which a number of properties may be built. My question is this being done separately to avoid triggering the need for social housing development?
So just to be clear, there is a piece of land south of this site, which is owned by the original applicant who made this application. It is not owned by the applicant today.
We are dealing.
It is outside of your development boundaries, and it is not, I don't think it's relevant for this.
Thank you for that, and that's the point I was going to make, but you've made it as well, so thank you. I think that's, unless we've got any more. Councillor Horgan, you were a millisecond ahead.
Just wanted to double check that, am I right in understanding that all windows above ground level now will be obscured glazing, all, or just some?
All windows facing out of the development at first floor are obscured. There are some windows between plot to plot at first floor, which has not been necessary to obscure because they overlook the common areas or they're by the garages. And so we've gone through it on a case by case basis and identified the ones with the planners, planning officers, and addressed it. But all windows that face out into proximate neighbouring amenity.
I think I must interrupt now, and the planning manager would like to clarify
It
something.
was purely to speed things up and to assist the lady here. If you have a look at the plans on your screen now, those which are highlighted in black on the screens are those windows which are to be obscure glazed. Any other windows are not proposed to be covered by the conditions. So this is plots 2 and 3. Do you want to quickly
If
go
I may,
to
on that drawing, if we could just go back to it, top right-hand corner, there appears to be a window which is half black and half not.
Yes, that would be keeping in line with the general principle under permitted development as to windows over a certain height. So
Okay.
you won't be able to see downwards. The idea being is you put the obscure glazing bit on it to preclude the view.
Right, I was just checking that I was understanding what I was seeing. Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
Just for clarity, councillor Horgan, that partial obscure glazing is on plot 3, which is facing towards plot 4, so it's not impacting any properties externally from the site.
We now move on to councillor Trent, who's going to ask a question from the applicant.
Thank you, Chair. Is the additional height needed to make your new system of housing work?
Yes, it is. The houses are designed based on the need for a canopy, which it provides solar protection for the summer, so it stops the houses from overheating. That is set at 2.2 metres high, which is only just above the door height. So, you know, it allows for sort of clear access underneath. The roof planes are orientated and pitched in order to capture the solar energy. And the ridge height is the intersection of the two.
Thank you. So I think that's all the questions for that, for the applicant. So we now move on to officer comments. I beg your pardon. Councillor Sharp, I do apologise. Please would you come up and speak? You are, just as an explanation, you were sitting exactly behind the gentleman in front of you and I couldn't see you.
Thank you, Chair. I've rewritten half of what I was going to say, having listened to comments just made. But in my 8.5 years as the district councillor, I've changed, the boundaries have changed, although I've been a member for Borough Green for that 8.5 years, so I've represented them. I've never known a situation like this. I first became aware of it back in September 2023, as was mentioned, when a resident rang me, I'm not going to name the resident, and told me that building was being done without permissions. I did ask the previous planning manager to stop the construction. Unfortunately, he decided not to agree with me. There is, and I think this is relevant, there is a lot of anger and distrust in the village at the moment because of an apparent disregard for planning permission. And it leads to the conspiracy theories about the 9 building dwellings on the next door plots, but I'll leave it there. What was significant by what's just been said is, as I understand it, from the applicant, the development was bought speculatively as a 5-home scheme from the previous owners, and is not of a similar build to what the original application was given. So it's totally different, and it seems that they've just then gone ahead because with putting that in now straight away, rather than, as I think the village felt was, oh, they're building 1 story. They've now gone up to 1.5 because partway through the development they thought that would work better. So I'm quite astounded by that. But anyway, let's go on to some planning items. Biodiversity, 48.85% loss. Part of that is because the whole of the site was cleared before the ecology report was done. And again, I couldn't find it, but I'm surprised there wasn't an ecology report on the original application, but if I've missed it. Damage to a sycamore tree that was specifically asked by the tree officer to be left. It's just been knocked to bits by bulldozers and everything else. Oh yes, another one will be planted, but you know, it counters the arrogance, shall I say, that I'm feeling. And again, with biodiversity, the purchase of suitable units. I personally, I know it's the rules. I don't like that. You know, if we're having biodiversity, it should be on that site. It shouldn't be on another site. But I understand the rules and you know, respect those. I don't necessarily agree with them. Tree landscaping. Certainly, the tree officer is not happy with. He's not certainly from what I see from the papers in front of you. He is not happy with. He's not said he's 100% written this offer as being acceptable. I know it, as Catherine said, it will be conditioned, but personally, the amount of time this application has taken, I think we should get all of those right in the first place. Waste bins, not adopted collection point. I see that as an issue knowing the layout, but that may have been sorted. It's been touched on, the obscure glazing. Now, there would need to be certainly, if this application goes ahead, there will certainly need to be covenants or whatever to stop a future purchaser of those properties actually going ahead and changing those windows. I don't know how, whether that can be done, because otherwise we have got unacceptable Overlooks, yes, thank you. I mean, the increased height, I have been in the gardens of one of the applicants, of one of the residents, sorry. And, yes, it does look a lot higher than the original application. It does look intrusive. And then I move on to, I mean, as has been said, a significant number of comments have been made in relation to developer behaviour. We've got, I know, one of the public letters that was written out has mentioned about damage to verges and damage to ditches. And I know officers quite rightly say it's not a planning issue, but the village feel let down by that. The village feel that, you know, that they're not being protected. The developer, you know, is not doing anything to actually win friends, I would suggest. So I just go back to what I said. Oh, and the other issue, sorry, increased parking of 4. So it's 4 parking spaces on each. If we're trying to be sustainable development and in compliance with NPPF, then I would have thought there shouldn't be four spaces on there. But to summarise, and I can see I'm coming to the end. Obviously, this has got to be decided on planning rules, but the developer, if this does go through today, the developer will feel, sorry, the applicant, the residents will feel very let down that the developer has blatantly been able to basically put 2 fingers up to the rules and with no consequences. Thank you, Chair.
Five-minute rule on speakers. Will you stay where you are? Members may have questions. Questions for Councillor Sharp. Councillor Ambrose-Smith.
The parking 4 spaces, to me, it seems really sensible. These are large family homes. You get a couple with 2 grown-up children. The chances are you're going to have 4 vehicles. And then you've got visitors, deliveries. We build estates with only 2 spaces and it looks awfully cramped. So I can't see how we can argue against 4 spaces personally.
Have you got any more questions? No, thank you very much. We will send someone out to you when this item's finished. Now, comments from officers.
If I may begin, Chair?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. I'll start off with the sort of non-planning related stuff first before we move into some of the more technical matters. I know it's been mentioned by a number of people, and even as officers, we do sympathise with residents when developments do commence before obviously permission is granted. However, it is not an offence in law to do so. It is entirely at an applicant's own risk, and the council has powers, should development be unacceptable, to remove them. I know that mention has been given to stop notices. They are very rarely done. There are compensation issues to them, and they should only ever be issued when you are serving a full enforcement notice at the same time. Council's local enforcement plan outlines when and where we will undertake such actions, and I'll leave it as that with regards to the enforcement side of things. However, as members in front of you today, please be aware that the NPPF and case law is clear. We are not allowed to consider either the thoughts nor the actions of applicants or developers. We merely must consider what we have in front of us and whether or not that is acceptable in local or national planning policy terms. Bear with me while I go through my notes. There was a comment made with regards to chimneys. Clearly, when we have vernacular designs or more traditional designs, we will always ask for chimneys on modern designer properties, bearing in mind most chimneys nowadays are non-functional. It is not logical in design terms to be asking for them. Thank you. I'll pass you over to Catherine.
Thank you. I just have a couple of matters I would like to address. Just first, for clarity, I've confirmed with one of the speakers today after their comments that the window that they were concerned about on plot 5 has been omitted from the current scheme. in terms of comments relating to land to the south of this application site, any development on that site would be subject to a planning application, which would likely come before members as it sits outside of a development envelope. In terms of biodiversity, the site was cleared prior to mandatory biodiversity net gain legislation coming into effect. That was cleared in commencement with the previous applications on the site. And therefore what the applicant has done is they've sort of said, okay, we will achieve a net gain on the basis of the current legislations, but it's not a requirement for this scheme. The ecologist has advised that they would require 1.4 biodiversity units, and that the estimated cost of that is around £80,000, just for a bit of understanding on what that equates to. But they are looking at providing in excess of that. So I think it was 2.45 I said in my presentation. In terms of the trees officer has commented on the landscaping scheme submitted. Changes to tree species are quite a minor thing, which is why we have recommended conditions, and the trees officer's concerns in relation to those are more to do with the location of things like fruit trees, where falling fruit might create a slip hazard for a resident on one of the internal pavements. There were some comments about vehicle parking, so 4 parking spaces. These are supposed to be sustainable properties, but the sustainability information that's been submitted alongside the application is indicating that electric vehicle charging will be provided for each of those dwellings. So I just wanted to cover off those matters. Thank you.
On parking, your own policy, COM8 parking provision does not give maximum numbers. It gives minimum for properties of this type. It is a minimum of 2 spaces, but the text within there basically says it should reflect the accessibility of the site and the character of that site as to the car parking provision. Thank you.
Well, we've finished now with comments from officers. We now go on comments from members to officers, and Councillor Trapp, you're first.
Thank you very much. So just to clarify, Catherine, you say the window, you talked with the object about the windows emitted. Does it mean that the window was emitted from the plans, or there is no window? Can I just confirm that?
The window was emitted from the plans.
So there is a window.
No, sorry, it's emitted on the plans. So it's showing where there was a window, and that change, that is probably quite hard to see on there, but it annotates that window is emitted, so that window will not be present. Yeah, so in the top image, hang on. Yeah, north elevation. So the top image, that window that's shown greyed out is annotated window emitted. So that's emitted. It's gone.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Horgan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Obviously, one of the concerns of neighbouring residents is whether the development is overlooking and overbearing. So I've just wondered, is the decision on that subjective? You stand there and look at it and go, yes, it is, no, it isn't. Or is there any guidance that we can refer to that talks about height of building or windows versus distance from adjacent properties? Because I'd like to know that, please.
There isn't any specific guidance. It's an assessment that we would make when we go out on site. In terms of the plot that's closest to sort of the rear elevations of neighbouring properties, that would be plot 1. The single storey element that protrudes from the rear is 5 metres from the boundary, and then there's a further 12 metres to the rear elevation of that property. And there's 14 metres between the 1.5 storey element and the boundary on plot 1. other distances we can measure, but it's an assessment that's made on site.
To clarify what I've heard, if I may, Chair. So plot 5, you're saying that the rear elevation is a single story or a 1.5 story? Because to me, it looks the same height as the main building.
Do you mean the north elevation along?
I mean, the extension that goes, obviously, it's a T shape. Okay, so it's the stand of the T going towards the existing properties, the two semi-detached houses behind it. Yeah, so on that drawing, plot 5 is that one,
Yep.
and then there's a two semi-detached houses there. So I'm talking about
Sorry.
the extension going that way. Is it 1 story or 1.5 stories?
Sorry, councillor Horgan, that's plot 1.
Sorry, plot 1, my
Okay.
mistake.
But
Yes,
just bear with
plot
me.
5's the other side of the road. You're absolutely right. I beg your pardon. Plot 5 is the other side of the road. Plot 1, so the rear extension is that 1 or 1.5 stories?
The rear extension is single story. It is. So the bottom left-hand elevation drawing, it's probably not as clear as this plan that we have in front of us here. The ridge height of the single story projecting element is close to the overall ridge height of the property. But it is set down slightly, not by very much, but there is a set down.
Do we know how much set down on plot 1? Just approximately. Are we talking a few inches? Are we talking 3 feet, a metre?
It's about 20-25 centimetres difference.
Thank you.
Okay, yes, I've got you, councillor Goodell, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. As much as we've been told that we can't take retrospective into consideration, do we as a council, after we granted planning permission to people, go out and check that they are following the plans that we've given planning permission to?
For the largest of developments, yes. For the majority, no, which is simply due to the resource that you would need to have to go out to check every single development. We do, well, as soon as we receive an inquiry that something may be amiss, and 9 times out of 10, when something is amiss, people will contact us. We do then obviously go out and make the appropriate checks against the planning permission. But you'd need an enforcement team 3 or 4 times the size that you've got to be able to routinely go out and monitor absolutely every development that we grant planning permission for. Thank you.
Well, members, we are now on to the debate section. And who's going to start off the general debate? Where you go.
Thank you. I think any local authority generally would be looking to raise the standards of the buildings in their area. And on the one hand, it's exceptionally good to see that this appears to go above minimum building control by some distance. I can certainly understand the need to expand the roof area to reduce solar shading, which I think was referred to by the applicant. Because one of the problems that we have with new homes is that we're insulating them better, but the difficulty then is keeping them cool. And I've spoken personally in previous lives to a number of developers that struggle to get the cold water temperature in a property down low enough so that people can even refer to it as cold water anymore. And obviously solar gain contributes greatly to the heating in a property. We haven't heard of the details of how the heating system will work and what type it is here. I don't know that that's particularly relevant, but I'm hoping it's going to be an environmentally friendly heating system. In terms of the actual design of the properties, I think one would not question the design at all. We are told that what we can't question is how we've got from the original application to where we are today. And I was trying to ascertain, you know, the personnel changes involving the owner, the agent, the builders, etc., to get a feel for those changes. But in terms of the actual property, it is difficult. Yeah, you would like to say, well, you've only got agreed one story and you've ignored that, etc. And we're not here to punish people that have, shall we say, massaged the rules and now come back seeking retrospective approval. And given the advice and the training we received as planning officers, it's going to be incredibly difficult to come up with material planning reasons why to refuse this application, as much as anybody would like to. So my proposal is that we accept it, but obviously give very clear instructions to council officers to make sure that those conditions are as specified in the report and that they are followed, because to come back here again, people might have a very different outcome. Thank you.
Before we move on, thank you, councillor. You've absolutely said what I was going to say, and thank you for that. And we do have to consider what's in front of us, and that's what we've got to do now. So we now move on. We're on general debate. Councillor Trout.
I think it's a difficult one. I think that notwithstanding the eco and passiveness and everything else of this build, and which I fully admire, but that could have well been achieved with having just a single story dwelling as in the original plans. And I just do not see why we should be accepting change. I think it's a material change actually to the outlook from from really what was, I think, a very suitable. I agreed, made the render, you know, brickwork outside and all material changes, but it was a suitable development, back development there of which would not have encroached so much on neighboring properties. And now actually it is becoming substantial. And I must say, I do not agree with Councillor Horgan. I think we should be actually refusing this, because I think it's considerable change to not the movements, but the actual size and just the extra height and the, yeah, it's just the wrong thing here, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Trump. I'm going to bring on the planning manager in a second, but I suspect he's going to say something that I would have said, but away you go.
It was merely, if Councillor Trapp is leaning towards a proposal for refusal, we need a lot more meat behind that. So we would need to know what policies he considers that the development does not meet, and then effectively a description of what harm he feels that the development is causing, because clearly by using words like substantial and things like that, they are not phrases that we would be able to stand behind its appeal. So I'd urge him just to go away and consider how he would wish us to phrase any such reason before it went to any vote. Thank you.
Councillor Trapp, I'm going to go to Councillor Ambrose Smith. And if you want to come back after that, then please do.
Try and see if I can come back.
I look forward to that. Councillor Ambrose Smith.
Thank you. I listened with interest to Councillor Sharp, and I quite understand as a ward member, members of the community do get incensed by matters that they see, they perceive as being roughshod and all the rest of it, but often without knowing the context of this, that and the other. So I understand that he felt he has to make this point. From a personal point of view, I don't think that this will be too obtrusive. I do understand the concern felt by the neighbour who spoke very eloquently first, and if I was in his shoes, possibly I would also feel great concern. I think these are a good design, and then we look at the retrospective aspect, and it's, yes, it's not quite what we want, but we are where we are. And so I will be, if Councillor Horgan is proposing that we follow and the approval of the officer, then I would like to second that. Thank you.
Just before I get to Councillor Goodall, Councillor Horgan, were you making a proposal? So you made a proposal and it's been seconded by Councillor Ambrose Smith. Yeah, okay. So we'll carry on now, and we've got Councillor Goodall. Councillor Trapp, I'm sort of waiting. If you want to contribute, you can do so. Well, I'll do these two questions. Okay. So Councillor Goodall.
Thank you, Chair. I have great concerns always when builders do things and then we have to come back retrospectively and then our hands are tied because permitted development before, and the chances of it ever passing an appeal are very, very slim. And I feel that the builders take advantage of this, and we need to have a look at this nationally to change this retrospective law. I appreciate that the buildings are to a very high standard and everything else, and I have great empathy with the neighbours not liking how it's been done roughshod. However, because my hands are tied, we will have to approve this because we have no other things to do. We've got to approve it, otherwise we're not following our own rules and the rules of planning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I like other members of this committee, object to people doing retrospective things. But if we come on our site visit and instead of seeing some of these houses already built, we'd actually looked at a plain field, and we had in fact just these plans, we probably wouldn't have thought twice about saying, yes, this is a good scheme. And the houses are well set apart. They're big, expensive houses. I mean, I think we need more smaller houses that people can afford, but still. We haven't got any good planning reason for objecting to this scheme. And if it was on a plain field, we wouldn't even think about objecting to it. So I should be supporting the officers.
As ever, Councillor Wilson, a very well thought out comment. Councillor Trapp.
Right. I've tried to think about something. Thinking is not always. Anyway, no, I do think that we should be at the moment, plot 1 has not been built, so we could actually be asking for that not to be as high or as near. Or, unfortunately, plot 5 has been built, but I do think it is actually far too close to the neighbouring property. I think it's just too high. And I'm not sure if that is substantial enough. Is that the fact that it's, yes, I would have thought that was a clear enough indication that this is not possible and it should not be happening. You,
First things first, councillor Trapp, we have to determine what's in front
I
of
was
us.
going to invite you to speak.
Sorry. First things first, sorry, councillor Trapp, we have to determine what's in front of us, so we can't say we'd like it to be lower. We either have to say that the height that's being proposed is unacceptable and then give solid reasons and policy basis for that. So well, what I'm trying to walk you through is what is your reasoning for, we can't purely say just because it is taller than the previous, it is unacceptable. We have to give a solid reason as to why we consider the increase in height to be unacceptable.
so are you saying that we grant planning permission to some building site and then find it is twice as big as before and say, oh, well, we would have got that anyway? I mean, surely the evidence here is that the parish, the residents have expected a lower, and they accepted this, a lower build, and now we find it's actually increased. And I would have thought that would be sufficient reason for trying to say, no, we're not going to accept this.
Respectfully, councillor Trapp, we have to say why we consider the extension in height to be unacceptable. If it is overbearing, if it is out of context with regards to design for it. So for example, if it was twice its original height, it would be taller than those buildings around it. We'd easily be able to say it was out of character, etc., etc. What I'm trying to tease out from you is why you consider the additional height to be unacceptable rather than purely the fact that it is higher than what was expected previously. We have to look, the NPPF and the legislation says that we have to look at these afresh as if these houses aren't there. So we have to say why we are considering something to be harmful, not just that it is different.
The harm is surely to the residents who expected something different. And what we're saying now is that, oh yes, build as high as you like. So for future planners.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we have to quantify and we have to, as neatly as possible, say why we consider the additional height to be unacceptable. Do you consider it to be out of keeping with its surroundings? Do you consider that it's causing an unacceptable impact on the neighbouring properties? Those are the questions which we need to run through and be confident on, bearing in mind what you've got is you've got a fallback position of what was previously granted. So you'll need to effectively go through your thought processes as to why the difference between the two is harmful, not the fact that there is a difference.
I think the difference that it will be material. First of all, I think these are much larger houses than were envisaged in terms of space and therefore far more occupants.
Councillor Trapp, I believe what the planning manager is saying is we should consider what is in front of us now. And I think we all share a rather disappointed attitude in that there was a plan for a bungalow and now it's a bungalow plus another story. But the fact is there is an application in front of us and we should be looking at that as a fresh application. And if we walked onto that site, what would be the planning reasons why we had to reject it? I think Councillor Horgan has put a very good reasoning together. I think we're all disappointed. And I think there are one or two words which in planning terms always seem to put a little bit of a shiver down my back. And that's the word retrospective. And the other one is viability. I think they confuse me. However, we should be looking for this and we can only turn it down with good, proper planning reasons. And I therefore ask if there are any more comments from members. Okay, so we have Councillor Horgan is proposing and it's being seconded by councillor Ambrose Smith, that the officer's recommendation to approve is councillor Trapp, you.
Sorry. Are there any permitted development rights, or are they going to be taken away in terms of extra windows or whatever it is? Have we teased out that?
Yeah, if you would allow me to clarify, Chair. In Appendix 1 of my report, condition 4 states that notwithstanding the provisions of the Town and Country Planning General Permitted Development Order, no windows, dormer windows, roof lights or openings of any other kind, other than those expressly authorised by this permission, shall be constructed at first floor level or above in any elevations without the prior written consent for the local planning authority. So that any changes would require a planning application. Condition 5 states that, again, notwithstanding the provisions of that order, no development within classes A, AA, B or C of Part 1 of Schedule 2 of the order shall take place on site unless expressly authorised by planning permission granted by the local planning authority. And those classes cover extensions, roof extensions and alterations, dormers, roof lights, basically anything to do with the roof. So I hope that provides you with some certainty.
I think that answers your
Yeah,
question.
I just wanted that certainty.
And that's very reasonable that you do. So we'll go back to where I was, which was councillor Horgan has proposed, councillor Ambrose Smith has seconded, that we members are recommended to approve the application. Things like the development rights have already been covered in the officer's recommendation. So will those in favour please raise their hands? Okay, you got them. Those against, please raise their hands. And have you got any abstentions? No, so that planning permission is approved, and thank you very much. That's the finish of that item. Bearing in mind we've got 2 applications today, I'm going to have a 5-minute comfort break, and that gives time if those people who've been covered to leave. Thank you for coming, and you can leave now. And we will restart at 25 past exactly. Members, if I can just have your attention before we get into formal session. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Before we start again, I had the opportunity this morning to see two detailed maps of what's proposed at Streatham and the Cambridge Road. They're now on the speaker's table. So I think if you'd like to wander over and have a look, it gives you a better understanding of what's being proposed than what you've got in front of you. Okay, members, we're now going to have the officer presentation on this item number 6.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon, members. So the application before you, I will confirm, has been to Planning Committee twice before in both April and June. It is for an outline planning application with all matters reserved, barring access for up to 83 affordable homes with associated infrastructure, including on and off-site highway works. As a refresher, here is the site location plan and an aerial view with an indicative layout. And also a coloured up version, including the description of the proposals, as I mentioned. So the application is taken to the April 2024 committee as well as the June 2024 committee. It was deferred on both times, with the latest deferral in June to address matters of highway safety. This is following the commissioning of an independent report prepared by Stantec on behalf of the local planning authority to assess whether or not the originally proposed refuge island scheme was suitable to mitigate the additional impacts of the 83 dwelling proposed when considering the baseline of the 38, that up to 38 that have been approved on the site already. I will remind members that both my committee reports and the Stantec report, as well as the decision list from the June committee, are appended to this report to provide clarity, and the recommendations and discussions within those reports are considered to remain valid. The discussions today, as set out within the decision list for the June committee, are now purely around highway safety and transport impacts, and that is what we'll be discussing with you today. For a refresher, the conclusions of the Stantec report are on the screen, and as well as the recommendations. Following the issuing of the report and further discussions with the applicant, a revised highway scheme has been put forward. That is illustrated on the plan that members have in front of them, and that is the D01 Rev B plan. Following the Stantec recommendations, I can confirm the updated works include street lighting to be extended to include the new access, keep clear markings across the site's proposed access, a puff-in crossing which is signal controlled across the A10, the widening of the western and eastern footpath adjoining the A10 to 3 metres, serving the site's vehicular access, proposed puff-in crossing and short road junction where it will taper down to the existing 1.2 metre width along short road, an infill of a section of footway between 42 and 44 Cambridge Road to enable access to the northbound bus stop along Cambridge Road. And there are also a package of measures included to encourage reduced vehicle speeds along Cambridge Road, which include the creation of a village gateway, a copy of which you'll be able to see on the plan in front of you and on the slides shortly, which also includes dragon teeth markings on the road, 1 metre wide central hatch strip with red surfacing with solid white lining in the middle of the carriageway, as well as 40 roundels and additional repeater signs. I can also confirm that matters of third-party highways land, which was with Stantec raising concerns these potentially hindered visibility displays, have also been clarified and addressed with the local highways authority as part of this process. And all of the works you see in front of you on the plan have been subject to a stage 1 road safety audit with the local highways authority. Just showing you on the screen there the proposed village gateway sign and its location in relation to the proposed site access, so it'll be well before any traffic actually meets that access. To confirm, on the basis of the revised highway scheme and following no objections from the local highways authority or the transport assessment team at the county council, it is considered that the proposed highway scheme is acceptable. It is considered to reduce the levels of fear and intimidation upon pedestrians and satisfy the overall objective of the Stantec report, this being to deliver a pedestrian crossing and associated infrastructure that is inclusive of the majority of users. This will also ensure to encourage active travel, walking, wheeling and cycling to and from the village. And it's on this basis, as well as the recommendations within my previous reports and found fully at Appendix 1 and Appendix 2, that the application is recommended for approval, subject to compliance with the following terms and Section 106 agreement. Thank you, members.
Thank you very much. We have Mr. Chris Frost, the agent, if you'd like to come up. You've got 5 minutes, and will you turn your microphone on, please? Most of the speakers this afternoon seem to consider the 5-minute limit as a sort of rough guide as where they might be. We'd rather consider it that you would be done by 5 minutes.
I shall attempt to get done in 3, Mr. Chairman. Members of the Planning Committee, my name is Chris Frost and I'm the agent for the application. The application before you seeks approval for 83 affordable homes and follows a previous approval for 38 similar homes on broadly the same site. The site is brought forward in association with Stonewater Housing Group, a registered affordable housing provider who will be developing out the site. This application was originally deferred at Planning Committee in April for a third-party review of the transport and access matters relating to the scheme, which was subsequently undertaken by transport consultant Stantec. The Stantec report raised no fundamental concerns in respect of the transport and access elements of the scheme and made 5 recommendations, including suggesting that there was the opportunity for further discussions with the County Highway Authority in respect of a signalised pedestrian crossing. In response, at Planning Committee meeting in June, we undertook to do everything that we could to get agreement from the County Highway Authority to introduce the new signalised crossing across the A10. Now, the crossing has been designed by our highway engineers and has been subject to an independent road safety audit, which confirms that the proposed road layout and pedestrian crossing will be safe for road users and for pedestrians. Following further consultation, both the Highway Authority and the County Council's Transport Assessment Team have confirmed that they do not object to the inclusion of a signalised crossing. So as you've already been advised by your officers, we're therefore delighted to confirm that the application scheme has been revised to include a pedestrian crossing along with a range of traffic calming measures, including the village gateway feature, which is designed to reduce vehicle speeds when approaching the village from the south, and wider pavements and street lighting to improve the pedestrian environment. The revised road layout and the pedestrianised crossing will be constructed at the applicant's expense under a Section 278 agreement. We note that there are no objections to the proposals from statutory consultees and that the applicant has received significant support from local residents, including 70 comments from people who wish to support affordable housing for the area. The minutes of the June Planning Committee record that members confirmed that there were no concerns relating to any other aspects of the scheme. Members made it clear in their discussion of the proposals at that meeting that if an acceptable highway layout and crossing could be achieved, they would support approval of the application. I'm therefore very pleased to be able to be back before you with a scheme that includes the pedestrian crossing, and I'm hopeful that we've done enough now to secure your support for the application. But if you have any questions, I would be more than happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that presentation. And could you confirm that the crossing and all the roadworks will be done before anyone moves into the houses?
Yes, certainly that it will be a pre-occupation condition. It'll be part of the 278, but I think that will be tied into the Section 106 agreement compared on that wording, yes.
Have we any more? Councillor Wilson, I think that was your hand.
Yes. I'm not sure it's a question, but I'd like to thank the applicant for listening to what the Planning Committee said and producing what we asked for.
Councillor Horgan.
Okay, ready to speak now. So previously, obviously, conditions as outlined, you're happy to agree to them all. Okay. And again, just a small point, you may not have it in front of you, but I'll read it out to you. In condition 17 says the access to all hard standing within the site shall be constructed with adequate drainage measures to prevent surface water runoff onto the adjacent public highway and retained in perpetuity. Whose responsibility would be for it to be retained in perpetuity?
So it's part of the detailed design of the drainage strategy for the site. It is proposed that the roads within the development will be put up for adoption by the Highways Authority. So when designed and constructed, it'll be the responsibility of the applicant or the developer. And once it goes over, is adopted by the Highways Authority, it will be the responsibility of the Highways Authority.
Councillor Trapp.
Thank you very much. It says affordable housing. Is that going to be for rent or for buy?
There is a mixture. There's a fairly detailed breakdown which we dealt with through your housing officer, but I believe it's about 50% would be affordable rented housing, and of the other 50% is shared ownership and a mix of intermediate housing. Maybe officers can confirm.
And that it'd be social housing then, is that right?
Yes, it would all be run by a housing association who would operate and manage them both.
Can I ask whether Chair, is it a big housing association or a small one?
Yes, Stonewater Housing Association is quite a large organisation. It operates throughout the southeast and actually across the country. So yes, it's a large organisation.
Councillor Ambrose Smith.
Hello. I believe I read somewhere that there will be a letting policy in that people with a close connection to Streatham will be considered at the top of the list, shall we say, and then in sort of descending order. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes. I don't think the detail of it is in the officer's report, but it's something we've discussed with the housing officer. So it has been designed specifically to meet local needs, which is how the mix of unit sizes and tenures has come forward. Yes, there will be a detailed letting policy which puts priority to local people first.
I'm going to interrupt, and the planning manager has indicated he wants to say something. I think I know what he'll be saying.
Can I gently remind members that all matters apart from the highway safety scheme were debated and voted upon at the last meeting? So please can we keep any questions in line to the matter in hand and what is in front of you? Thank you.
We're playing the same record there. Any members' questions? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. I've got one question, couple of points which I'll bring up later in the debate or whatever. You mentioned the scheme, the highway scheme looks good. It mentions the 3 metre wide footpath on both sides. Is that LTN 120 compliant, and is it meant to be for both cyclists and pedestrians to use?
I'm going to be perfectly honest. I don't know what LTN 21 compliance is. Apologies for that. It's not designed to be a shared path for pedestrians and cyclists, though.
I think you've basically answered the question with the last bit. Yeah, thank you.
Any more questions for the applicant? No, thank you very much indeed. Well, we now got to further comments from the officer.
No further comments from me, Chair. Thank you.
Any questions, Councillor Horgan?
Thank you, Chair. I was just, that slide still left up. What page is Appendix 5 on in our pack?
It is in the report. It's on the 58.
58.
Yeah, it's at the top of the page in bold. It's a full list of conditions, so they're a repeat of the previous report in April.
All right. Okay. So Appendix 5 is before Appendix 1. Sort of.
No, sorry, I think it's how it's been because I've
It's
had
okay.
to compile
No,
many
just-
different reports.
I found Appendix 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then looked for Appendix 5 afterwards, but it's earlier in the document. Thank you.
Right, members. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question of officers, but it's probably more of highways officers, to be fair. But I'm just thinking about the Puffing crossing and thinking about the length of time. There might be a standard national length of time it can stay green for, but I'm just thinking of if we've got elderly residents in that in the new development, is there, obviously the longer, some of those are going to take time getting across, and it's quite a busy road. So I'm just thinking, is there something we can impose, or I say it's more a highways question rather than planning? But
yeah, it's not really something planners that we ever have control over. Under the 278, obviously what will happen is the Puffing crossing will then pass to the county, who will then effectively operate it, and they will have a standard time period, which is normally in line with accessible requirements to allow people who are slower walking across. What normally happens is you have a fixed red signal for a period of time, and then you have a flashing red signal for a secondary period of time, which is intended to allow for anyone who is on the crossing to clear. If I may, Chair, just before we go off, the one thing I wanted to mention was at the last meeting, it was minuted that we would take all reserved matters back. Whilst it's not on the screen there, that is still the intention. So all reserved matters will still be brought back to Planning Committee. Sorry, I was saying, if you remember at the previous meeting, we minuted that all reserved matters. So when we receive reserved matters applications, they will be brought in front of the committee. And I'm saying whilst it's not on the screen there, that is still the intention. The officers will be bringing back all reserved matters. I just wanted to clarify that point.
If we're finished with questions to the officers, now we go on to debate. Oh, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Goodall. Councillor Wilson first.
I would like to propose we accept the officer's recommendation, and we've now got a very good scheme with safe crossings for the people and a lot of affordable housing, which we so desperately need.
Councillor Goodall.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to second the proposal and also thank the agent and the applicants for listening to the planning committee and adjusting their plans and accepting what we put forward for the safety of the people who are going to move into them houses. Thoroughly accept what's happening now.
I think my experience of these pedestrian controlled lights which are in Hadnam and at Whitchford roundabout is that they can be adjusted if it appears that the sort of the delays are inappropriate. They can be adjusted. And of course, in somewhere like the one we're talking about today, I can imagine there in term time, busy periods at 8:30 in the morning and 3:30 in the afternoon, and then busy periods with the heavy traffic at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, at 7 in the morning. So I think they could be altered. Have we any more debate? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. I'm making the comments quite often there that aren't planning things, but I mentioned I like, obviously I wasn't on planning committee when the previous decision was taken. The scheme looks good, the highways looks good. I just think highways have missed a trick here in that we now, if this development gets passed, we will now have housing from the 40 mile an hour to the roundabout. We could have put a 30 in there, and I think because I like the Sharp's Teeth idea, I like the gateway. I just think highways have missed a trick, which is not unusual for highways. But I'm in support of the scheme. Thank you.
I suspect where we've got to at the moment is that it seems likely members are going to support this afternoon. And it would seem that if there is some experience, that would be an ideal candidate for an LHI bid. It would seem to me. Keith.
Thank you, Chair. In fact, your words triggered my thoughts. When it comes to experience, the fact that we have a developer here that can build a development based on 100% affordable homes, and yet other developers struggle sometimes to meet 20% when we would ideally like 30. I'd like to see if there was any way that we could learn from this experience, that could be reflected in other applications which say that their business cases can't achieve sometimes even 20% affordable homes, let alone the 30 that we would like to ask for. So I know it might put an additional burden on the applicant, but if there's any learnings they think that they could pass our way as to making these developments more affordable for the developer as well as the owners, I'm sure that information would only benefit us.
I think in most of these cases, the answer is commercial, and the people who own the land, what they feel it's worth and if they want to sell it or not. And the sums add up in some circumstances and others they don't. I'm sure you realise that it's not, it would be nice if it was that simple, but it isn't. And we are
I am a simple person, Chair.
We're a planning committee here. Right, we're still on debate. Any other members? Well, I've got a, unless there's a sort of suddenly flurry of hands, we've got a proposal from Councillor Wilson. We've got a seconded by Councillor Goodall, and that is that we accept the officer's recommendation and including with all the terms that are in the agenda. So will those in favour please raise their hands? Will those against please raise their hands? Will those abstaining please raise their hands? And we have what numbers?
10 in favour, 1 abstinence. No. None against.
Well, that is, even for those who are weak on maths, that is passed, and the application is approved. And those who would like to go are welcome to go if you want, or you can stay on for item number 7, which probably won't take very long. Okay, Mr. Murrens.
Thank you, Chair. So item 7 is planning performance, July 2024. As usual, I'll draw members' attention to the report in front of yourselves, which is to be noted. As per the request of members at the previous planning committee, we have now put the statistics on that we are able to with respect for pre-application. If that's okay, then obviously we'll continue to do that. If we need a different breakdown, please just let me know and we'll do what we can to provide that. You'll note that what we haven't given you is determined on time. That's because we don't have a statutory timetable per se, and therefore we don't record as tightly as we would for those that we do have a statutory timetable for. But please be assured that what we are doing within the department is we are looking to tighten our procedures up with regards to making sure that we get them out in a timely manner, because quite frankly, we're offering a commercial service, therefore there is an expectation on our customers that we deliver them the product that they want in the time that they want. And I'm happy as ever to answer any questions that people may have.
Councillor Trapp.
Yes, I mean, the item number 5 said, you know, was an application was received a year ago. I've in my ward have got an application which was received in January 23rd and still outstanding. Is it possible that we have, you know, somewhere should we be noting how many applications are outstanding like that?
It's not as simple as that, is in honest answers, because outstanding could mean beyond the 8-12 weeks, which is the government's initial targets for us dealing with planning applications. But as members will be well aware, if we agree an extension of time, as far as the statistics you have in front of you and the statistics are returned to central government, they are considered to be determined in time. So we could provide information as to those applications which are out of an extension of time to members, if that's something which you'd find of interest. What members should be aware of, obviously, is we do have a new negotiation protocol. We have been using that on applications that have been around for a long time, which are, quite frankly, not progressing. So we have been seeking to dispose or refuse of those. And we can use the example that came to committee a few months ago in Soham as one of those. So we are, as officers, making sure that we are going through trying to either progress or determine the older planning applications. But something that's been in for a year maybe, but it's been a number of different revisions of it. Now, the negotiation protocol is very much designed to reduce the amount of revisions that we have so that we can get those applications through quicker for both the benefit of applicants, but also officers who quite often can get stuck in an endless loop. But I'm more than happy to discuss that with any members that have any concerns with regards to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for updating with the additional information. I think pre-apps was what I asked for, was it not? That's there. Thank you. That's good. Not wishing to overstay my welcome in terms of asking for information. One of the things that's been I've become aware of is that previously the government has seemed to involve themselves in certain planning committees and planning departments where the number of appeals has grown and those appeals are overturned, the council has refused permission and then subject to appeal, it's been granted. Here we look on the last page, appeals decided 5 in the month of July. I was wondering if it's possible just to have a year-to-date running total. I'm sure that the information's there because you capture it on a monthly basis, just so that we can see. I've heard stories of another council, not a million miles from here, where when the number of appeals increased above 20% that they lost, the government decided to put them into special measures. And I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want us to get anywhere close to that. So just tracking it on an annual basis would be good.
Thank you, Councillor Horgan. Interestingly, the central government target when it comes to appeals is based on your percentage of planning applications overall. So it's based on a percentage of planning applications that go to appeal and then a percentage which are overturned. So it's not a hard and fast percentage rule of those one. I've always worked on the philosophy that operating at about 66-33 is about the right percentage. And the logic of that being is if you're winning every single appeal, you're probably not refusing things that you should be refusing. And if you're losing every single appeal, then you can read into that. You can read into that you're refusing things that you shouldn't be refusing. So which is why I'm saying there should always be a balance. We shouldn't be upset that we are losing the odd appeal because it shows that we are probably at the right balance when it comes to testing and stretching our policies. But I will see if we can provide a yearly target. That shouldn't be a problem. Yeah, well, we provide that with regards to our PS1 and PS2 returns, so we can probably do that for appeals. I will ask the team. Thank you.
Any more questions for David? No, in which case I'd like to close this meeting and thank members for coming. It's been a lively discussion. I think there's lessons to be learned, and I think some of the items where we have to do things, even though we're a little bit uncomfortable with it, but I think that's the way it is and not much can be done about it. So thank you very much. You can go now.